It was the kind of night that should have felt like any other. The smell of freshly brewed coffee still lingered in the air as I sat alone on the couch, trying to quiet my thoughts. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to a few hours of peace, to just let the exhaustion wash over me. But peace never arrived, not in the way I expected. The door creaked open softly, and I didn't even have to look up to know she was standing there. I could hear the faint shuffle of her footsteps on the hardwood floor. But something was off, something was different in the air. It wasn't the usual, tired steps that would have walked right past me toward the kitchen. No, this time she paused. "Can we talk?" Her voice was quiet, but carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. I didn't even recognize the tone. I turned my head toward her, expecting the usual worn-out look of the woman I had seen 1,000 times before, the woman who had shared her day with me, who was always eager to unwind. But instead, she was standing there in the doorway, her figure framed by the dim light of the hallway, her eyes shadowed, distant. For a second, I thought about what she might say. Maybe she was tired, maybe something had happened at work, maybe she just needed some space. But I wasn't prepared for what was about to come. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say, honestly. Her presence was unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. Slowly, I put my phone down on the coffee table, my mind already racing ahead, trying to figure out what was coming. "Sure, what's going on?" I finally muttered, the words tasting foreign on my tongue. She stepped into the living room, her movements deliberate, almost too careful, like she was calculating every step. She didn't sit down, though, and that's when I started to feel the unease spread in my chest. Whenever we talked, she always sat next to me. But tonight, it was as though there was an invisible barrier between us, one I couldn't quite understand. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her purse as she stood in front of me, looking everywhere but directly at me. "I need to ask something of you," she said, her words soft but firm, like she was about to say something that would change everything. And I realized, almost too late, that I had no idea what was coming. I leaned forward, sensing that something wasn't right. "What do you need to ask?" I was suddenly hyper-aware of the space between us, the silence that had settled like a heavy blanket over the room. She finally looked at me, and when she did, I noticed how different she looked. Not just tired, but distant. Her eyes didn't have that familiar warmth they once held. They were guarded, like she was keeping something from me, something important. "I need you to understand this isn't easy for me to say." She paused, swallowing hard, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "I have to stay the night with someone else." My heart stopped. I'm not sure how long I sat there, but the world around me seemed to blur, like time itself had lost its meaning. I didn't know how to respond, didn't know if I had heard her correctly. The air felt thick, suffocating. I blinked a few times, trying to pull myself out of the confusion that was settling in my head. "What?" The word escaped me before I could stop it. I felt like an idiot saying it, but I couldn't think of anything else. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking with mine as she tried to gauge my reaction. "I need to stay with him tonight. I know this sounds insane, but please, try to understand. It's not what you think. You have to trust me on this." Trust? How could I trust her when she was telling me that? My brain felt like it was in a fog, and the idea of what she was saying didn't even seem to belong in reality. "You're staying with another man?" The words came out before I could filter them, and instantly, I felt a rush of guilt for saying them so bluntly, but what else was there to say? This didn't make sense. She nodded, her expression almost unreadable. "It's not about what you think it is. You have to believe me. This isn't about us, or about someone else. It's complicated." I sat back, the weight of her words hitting me like a ton of bricks. Complicated? Was there really such a thing as a complicated affair? I didn't understand. Nothing about this made sense, and yet, part of me wanted to believe her. Some small, foolish part of me was still clinging to the idea that this wasn't as it appeared. "Why?" I managed to croak. "Why do you need to do this?" She hesitated, as if the answer was right there, but she didn't know how to say it. "It's not about you. It's something I have to do, something I've been asked to do. I can't explain it all right now, but when it's over, I'll tell you everything. But I need you to trust me. Please, just this once." I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, jumping from one thought to the next, but I couldn't find a clear path through the storm. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking at my sides. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I just felt numb. So you want me to just let you go with him? The words felt foreign in my mouth, as if they didn't belong to me. I know this is a lot, but yes, I promise, when I get back, I'll explain everything. But for now, I need you to believe in me. For a long moment, we just stood there, the silence stretching between us like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. I didn't know if I could say yes, if I could let her go. But I did. Because what else could I do? Fine. I whispered, my voice almost lost in the void between us. Go. But don't come back expecting things to be the same. She nodded, her face a mixture of relief and guilt. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. I could hear the door close softly behind her. But even after the sound faded, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. And I was right. I couldn't move. For what felt like hours, I just sat there, staring at the door she had left through, trying to wrap my mind around what had just happened. It was like someone had dropped a bomb in the middle of my life, and I was left standing in the wreckage, too stunned to react. I couldn't make sense of it. She had been so calm, so collected about the whole thing. There was no hesitation in her voice when she told me what she was doing. No sense of guilt, no shame, just an overwhelming confidence that I would simply accept it. And for a moment, I had. I had told her to go. I had let her walk out, knowing full well that whatever she was involved in wasn't just an innocent thing. But I couldn't take it back. I was stuck in a decision I never wanted to make. Minutes, maybe hours, passed before I finally stood up. My legs felt like they were made of stone, stiff from the weight of the conversation, but I forced myself to move. I walked around the apartment, the silence suffocating me. The little things, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic noise from outside, suddenly felt amplified. Everything felt too loud, too still. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of Sarah's words, of the strange calmness in her tone. What was she really saying? And who was the man she was going to stay with? I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the list of names that seemed so familiar just hours before. Friends, family. But no one seemed like the right person to call. No one would understand. No one would believe me. Hell, I barely believed myself. I set the phone back down, my mind still spinning, and returned to the couch. My thoughts were all over the place. There had to be an explanation, right? Maybe she was just in some kind of crisis, some situation I couldn't understand. Maybe she had been pushed into it. Maybe, but the more I thought about it, the more the knots in my stomach tightened. It was then that I remembered something. Something small but significant. She had been distant for the past few weeks. At first, I thought it was just stress from work or maybe just life getting in the way, but now I couldn't ignore it. She had been acting strange, disappearing for long stretches, coming home late, avoiding certain conversations. Every time I asked about it, she'd brush it off, claim everything was fine, but now I saw it for what it was, a warning sign. I hadn't seen it at the time, too busy with my own life, too comfortable in the idea that we were solid. But now, everything made sense. She had been pulling away, and I hadn't done a damn thing to stop it. The minutes continued to drag on, and I began to realize I was no longer waiting for an explanation. I was waiting for something else, for her to come back and tell me that this was all some kind of horrible joke, that there was a simple explanation. But the longer I sat there, the more I began to doubt that. What if this was real? What if Sarah was telling me the truth, or at least part of it? My chest tightened at the thought. How could I not trust her? How could I not believe in the woman I'd spent years building a life with? But then, a new thought hit me like a slap in the face. What if this was just the beginning? What if tonight wasn't just a one-off request, but the start of something much worse? My heart skipped a beat at the realization. What if Sarah wasn't who I thought she was? What if there were things about her, about our relationship, that I hadn't seen? I had never suspected anything. There had never been any signs of infidelity or dishonesty in our relationship. I was too busy being in love, too naive to think that something like this could happen to me. I stood up again, pacing the room in frustration, trying to think clearly, but the more I thought, the more confused I became. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let her walk out of my life without knowing what was really going on. The thought of her with another man sent a rush of anger through me, but at the same time, there was a strange pull, a sense of desperation to find out the truth. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack by the door and left the apartment, my mind racing. I needed answers. I needed to find her. I didn't know where to start, but I had to do something. The air outside was cool against my skin, and the city felt alive in a way that didn't match the numbness I felt inside. My feet carried me aimlessly at first, but then something in me snapped. If she was staying with someone else, I needed to know who that person was. I needed to confront this head-on. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a second, I thought it might be Sarah, calling to explain herself. I pulled it out quickly, hoping for some kind of message that would make this all make sense. But it wasn't her. It was just a notification from my bank, something about a payment. Nothing that mattered. I cursed under my breath and tucked the phone back in my pocket, my mind already returning to the task at hand. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to sit here, helpless, while she did whatever she was doing. No, this wasn't just about a night away. This was about something bigger, something I had to uncover. But as I walked through the darkened streets, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my chest. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I knew it would change everything. I wasn't just going to lose my wife. I was going to lose myself in the process. I didn't know where I was going. It was late, the streets were quiet, but my mind was anything but. I couldn't sit at home anymore, not knowing what Sarah was doing, who she was with. The questions swirling in my mind were becoming suffocating, and all I wanted was answers. My thoughts raced ahead, jumping from one theory to the next. Maybe she had lost herself. Maybe there was something she wasn't telling me, something hidden beneath the surface of our perfect life. But how could I not have seen it? How could she have hidden this from me for so long? I found myself at a bar. I hadn't intended to come here. But when my feet stopped moving, when I realized I had been walking aimlessly for almost an hour, it was the only place that felt familiar. The neon lights flickered above the entrance, casting a soft glow on the dark sidewalk. I pushed the door open and entered, the sound of chatter and clinking glasses a strange contrast to the storm raging in my head. I walked straight to the bar and ordered a drink, trying to shake the tension in my shoulders. The bartender didn't ask any questions. He just slid the glass toward me with a slight nod, and I took a long sip, letting the alcohol burn down my throat. It didn't help. Nothing could numb this. Nothing could quiet the voice in my head that was screaming at me, urging me to do something, to make sense of this nightmare. The minutes dragged by. My phone was still in my pocket, but I couldn't bring myself to check it. The last thing I wanted was a message from Sarah, another half-hearted attempt to explain herself or make me believe that everything was fine. The more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it sounded. She was staying with another man, and I was supposed to just accept that? My stomach twisted in knots, and the drink in front of me became less of a distraction and more of a reminder that I was completely powerless in this situation. Then, just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. I froze. It was a message from Sarah. My heart started racing, my hands clammy as I pulled the phone out and unlocked it. The message wasn't long, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. I know this is hard, but I need you to trust me. It's not what you think. Please don't come looking for me. I'll be back soon, and we can talk about it. That was it. No explanation, no details. Just a vague plea for trust. It was like she was trying to buy time, to delay the inevitable conversation that would unravel everything. But why? What was she hiding? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. I could ask her where she was. I could demand answers right now. But something stopped me. Something deep inside me told me that if I confronted her now, if I pushed her too hard, I might never get the truth. What if this was all part of some game she was playing, some twisted test of loyalty or control? What if there was more to this than just a simple affair? I left the bar and stepped back out into the cool night air, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. My thoughts were swirling, each new theory more outlandish than the last. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being manipulated. That maybe, just maybe, this was all part of some bigger plan. My chest tightened at the thought. I had to know. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find out what Sarah was really doing, who she was really with. But I didn't know where to start. I didn't know if I should follow her, or if I should keep my distance and wait for the truth to come to me. My mind kept running in circles, and every step I took felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, I remembered something else, something that had slipped my mind earlier. A few weeks ago, Sarah had mentioned a friend at work, someone she had been spending a lot of time with. She'd always brushed it off, saying it was nothing, just a colleague. But now, I couldn't help but wonder if this friend was more than just a coworker. What if he was the man she was staying with tonight? I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through her messages, trying to find anything that could give me a clue. There were plenty of texts, but nothing that stood out. Just the usual, "How's your day going?" and "I'm looking forward to tonight." Things that seemed innocent enough at the time. But now, they felt like part of the puzzle, pieces I hadn't put together. I found her contact information and stared at the number for a moment, my mind racing. Should I call him? Should I confront him? What would I even say? My thumb hovered over the screen, but before I could make a decision, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. I didn't recognize the number. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a second, but something inside me told me to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice tight, my stomach in knots. "Is this Daniel McAllister?" The voice on the other end was low, calm, but there was a strange edge to it, something that made my blood run cold. "Yes, who is this?" I asked, my throat dry. The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "This is Nathan. I think we need to talk." The air around me seemed to still. Nathan. That name hit me like a punch in the gut. The name of Sarah's so-called friend. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything was falling into place, but none of it made sense. What did he want? Why was he calling me now? "Where's Sarah?" I demanded, my voice more forceful than I intended. Nathan didn't answer right away, and the silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, he spoke, his words deliberate, as though he were measuring each one carefully. "I think you should meet me. There's a lot more going on than you realize." I felt my blood pressure spike. What the hell was happening? What was he trying to tell me? But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was bigger than I ever imagined. My mind raced as Nathan's voice echoed in my ears. The casual calmness in his tone only made the situation feel even more ominous. Nathan, Sarah's friend. The same person she had been spending late nights with, the one she had mentioned in passing a few weeks ago, as though it was just a simple work relationship. But nothing about this was simple. Not anymore. My hands gripped the phone tighter, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me, suffocating me. I knew I had to meet him. I had to understand what was going on. If I didn't, I'd be left in the dark, drifting in a sea of confusion and unanswered questions. But something deep down told me this meeting wasn't going to provide the closure I so desperately needed. No, I was walking into something much darker than I realized. "Where?" My voice sounded different than it did just minutes ago, tense, sharp. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. You know the place." Nathan's words came through with unsettling clarity. The old warehouse by the docks. It was an industrial area, mostly abandoned, far from the main part of town. Not a place anyone would go unless they had a reason. I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me to ignore this, to hang up and pretend it never happened. But there was no going back now. The answers I had been seeking were at the end of this call, and I couldn't turn away. "How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't some game?" I fired back, my frustration finally surfacing. There was a slight chuckle on the other end of the line, but it wasn't warm or comforting. It was cold, distant. "You don't," Nathan replied, the words sliding off his tongue like ice. "But if you really want to know the truth, I suggest you show up. You'll get everything you've been asking for." I stood there, frozen for a few seconds, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Was this a trap? Was I walking into something far worse than I had imagined? Every part of me told me to walk away, but I couldn't. The need for answers, the need to understand what had happened to my wife, to our marriage, was too strong. I wasn't about to let Sarah's cryptic behavior go unanswered. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there." Before Nathan could say another word, I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood motionless, staring at my phone in disbelief. The old warehouse. It wasn't far, but it felt like a world away. I didn't know what to expect when I got there, but I knew one thing. I wasn't walking into a simple conversation. This was something deeper, something dangerous. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The streets were eerily quiet as I made my way to the outskirts of town. The warehouse district was an area I hadn't visited in years, not since I was a kid, when I used to roam around the abandoned buildings with my friends. Back then, it was an adventure. Now, it felt like stepping into a forgotten part of my own life, a part that had been left untouched for a reason. The drive felt longer than it should have, my thoughts racing the entire way. What was Sarah involved in? Why had she lied to me? And why had Nathan, this man I didn't even know, become the bridge between my past and whatever twisted reality I was walking into? As I drove through the empty streets, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Sarah had been hiding from me. What else had I missed? I arrived at the warehouse just as the last traces of daylight were fading. The place was exactly as I remembered, dark, decaying, with broken windows and rusted metal doors. The air was thick with the smell of salt water from the nearby docks, and the faint sounds of distant waves crashing against the shore echoed through the night. I parked my car in a shadowed corner, the headlights briefly illuminating the entrance before I killed the engine. I sat there for a moment, just looking at the dilapidated structure. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. I had no idea what to expect, but something in my gut told me that what I was about to learn would change everything. For better or for worse, the answers I had been searching for were waiting for me inside. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward the entrance. The door was half open, creaking on its rusted hinges as I pushed it slightly further, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent night. The warehouse was dark, the only light coming from a single overhead bulb that flickered sporadically. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I could make out the faint outline of figures moving in the shadows. I froze. There, in the corner of the room, standing near a stack of old crates, was Nathan. He was tall, wearing a black leather jacket, his face obscured by the shadows. But I could still feel his presence, like he was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. "You came," Nathan said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. There was something almost amused in his tone, but also something else. Something dark. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was too big, the knot in my stomach too tight. Instead, I stepped further into the warehouse, my footsteps heavy on the cold concrete floor. My eyes scanned the room, searching for Sarah, searching for any sign of what was really going on. But there was nothing. Just the dark, empty space, and Nathan standing there, waiting. "You don't know, do you?" Nathan asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was colder now, more calculating. "You still think you're going to get all the answers here, don't you? You still think everything is going to make sense?" I felt a chill run down my spine. His words, though vague, struck a nerve. What did he mean? What was he hinting at? "I came here for the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the fear building inside me. "Now tell me, what is this? What is going on between you and Sarah?" Nathan didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as if he were evaluating me, sizing me up. I could see a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and I hated the way it made me feel. "You think this is about Sarah?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "You really think you're the one who's been kept in the dark?" I felt a rush of anger surge through me, but I held it in check. I couldn't afford to lose control now. Whatever was happening here, whatever game Nathan was playing, I was determined to find out what it was. "Then tell me, Nathan, tell me what this is about." My voice was sharp now, demanding. Nathan stepped back, a slight chuckle escaping his lips. "The truth, Daniel, is much bigger than you think, and it's going to hurt more than you ever imagined." I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't care. Just tell me." And that's when I saw it. Through the dim light, I caught sight of something, or someone, moving in the far corner. My breath caught in my throat as the figure stepped forward, revealing a face I never expected to see. It was Sarah, but she wasn't the woman I knew anymore. At first, I didn't recognize her. The dim lighting of the warehouse cast long shadows over her face, making her look different. But as she stepped closer into the pool of flickering light, the sight of her hit me like a punch to the gut. It was Sarah, but she wasn't the same woman who had left me only hours ago. There was something different about the way she carried herself, something cold and calculating in the way her eyes flickered toward me, before turning quickly to Nathan. For a moment, I was frozen. The anger and confusion I had been holding onto for so long suddenly vanished, replaced by a bone-deep sense of betrayal. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, standing there, with him. But it wasn't just the sight of her with another man that was so jarring. It was the look in her eyes. It wasn't the apologetic, guilty expression I'd expected. No, it was something much darker, something far more unsettling. Nathan glanced over at Sarah, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. She's not the woman you think she is, he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing as I struggled to find words. What is this? I managed to croak. What's going on, Sarah? What is all of this? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. She was standing next to Nathan now, her hand casually resting on his arm, a subtle gesture that seemed almost too intimate for my mind to process. You should have never come here, Daniel, Sarah finally said, her voice flat, almost detached. There was no emotion in her words, no regret. It was like she was talking to someone she barely knew, not the man she'd shared her life with. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. What do you mean? What the hell is going on? I trusted you. The words felt like they were being ripped from me, my voice breaking with every syllable. She took a deep breath, then looked over at Nathan again, as if asking for his permission, as if she wasn't quite sure how to proceed. Nathan gave a small nod, almost as though he were amused by the entire situation. Sarah turned back to face me. You were never meant to know, she said, her tone now laced with something cold, something I didn't recognize. You were always in the way. Her words hit me like a slap. In the way? I repeated, my voice cracking. What do you mean? What is this about? She stepped closer, but not in the way a wife would approach her husband after a fight. No, this was different. There was distance in her every movement. You've been blind, Daniel, too focused on your little life to see what was really going on. I took a step back, the words barely processing in my mind. What are you talking about? What was going on? What have you been hiding from me? My chest tightened with each passing second, my mind screaming for answers. Nathan laughed softly, cutting through the tension like a knife. She's been involved with something far bigger than you, Daniel. You've been living in your little bubble, thinking everything was normal. But it wasn't. It never was. I looked at Sarah, my eyes desperate for her to deny it, for her to tell me this was all some sick joke, but she didn't. She didn't say a word. Instead, she looked at me like I was some stranger, some nuisance that had overstayed his welcome. You've been part of the distraction, Daniel, Sarah said, her eyes hard. Part of the life I was forced to pretend. I never wanted to hurt you, but you were never meant to be in the loop. You were never meant to know the truth. The world tilted beneath me, and I had to steady myself against one of the rusted beams to keep from falling. I tried to make sense of her words, but everything was slipping away. She wasn't just telling me she had been unfaithful. No, this was something deeper, something more calculated. Truth. I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. What truth? What the hell are you talking about, Sarah? Nathan stepped forward then, his eyes glinting with something dark. You're about to learn that this whole life you've been living, it's been a lie. All of it. Sarah's been playing a role, a part she was forced into. She's been working with people who had plans that didn't include you. He paused, watching me closely. But you weren't supposed to find out. You weren't supposed to get this far. I could feel the blood draining from my face. People? Plans? What are you saying? Who the hell are you? Who am I? Nathan laughed, shaking his head slowly. You think Sarah just decided one day to go along with me? No. There's a whole operation at play here, Daniel. And you were just the perfect cover. He looked at Sarah, his gaze shifting to something almost affectionate, as though they shared some unspoken bond. You lied to me. I managed, barely able to form the words. All this time, you lied to me. Sarah didn't flinch at my accusation. Instead, she simply nodded, as if confirming something I had already figured out. It wasn't personal, Daniel. You were never part of the plan. I felt my knees grow weak, but I refused to let myself collapse. What the hell is the plan? What do you want from me? My voice was louder now, more frantic. I had to know. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. Nathan took a step closer, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. What we want, he said slowly, savoring each word, is for you to stay out of the way, for you to stop being a threat. He glanced at Sarah again, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. You're not supposed to be part of this, Daniel. Sarah finally spoke again, her voice cold, detached. But you've been digging too deep. You've seen too much. You need to stop. Stop. I repeated, incredulous. Stop what? You're telling me this whole time you've been working with him, and I'm supposed to just walk away? From what? From everything? Nathan's smile widened, but it wasn't comforting. Exactly. Walk away, Daniel. Forget about Sarah. Forget about everything you thought you knew. If you don't, things are going to get much worse for you. The weight of his words hung in the air, thick with the threat of something I couldn't yet understand, but I could feel it, the danger that was now closing in around me. But as I stood there, frozen in place, something clicked inside me. I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about something much bigger, something much darker than I had ever imagined. And I was determined to uncover it all, no matter the cost. The silence in the warehouse felt suffocating. Nathan's words hung in the air like a thick fog, blurring everything I thought I knew about my life. "You're not part of this, Daniel," he had said. "Forget about everything." But how could I forget? How could I just walk away when the very fabric of my existence had just been torn apart? I could feel the panic rising in my chest, the same panic I had tried to suppress ever since Sarah left me hours ago. But now, it wasn't just the fear of losing her. It was the fear of losing everything I thought was real. The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, like the world was slowly tilting toward an unknown abyss. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be sucked in or if I would be left hanging on the edge, waiting to fall. "Stop acting like this is all some game," I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. I wanted to believe I was still in control, but I felt like I was drowning in a sea of confusion and betrayal. "What's going on here? What's your plan, Nathan?" Nathan's smile remained unchanged, but there was something darker in his eyes, a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. "This isn't a game, Daniel. This is bigger than you can imagine, and Sarah's been part of it for a lot longer than you think." I looked over at Sarah, still standing beside Nathan, her face unreadable, her eyes distant. She didn't look at me, didn't flinch at Nathan's words, and that hurt more than anything else. "You knew all this time, didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You knew what was happening, and you still chose to stay with me, to lie to me." Sarah didn't speak for a long time, her gaze fixed on the ground. Finally, she looked up at me, and her expression was completely devoid of emotion. "I didn't have a choice, Daniel. You never had to know about any of this. But you pushed me into a corner. You kept asking questions, digging where you weren't supposed to. Now, you've seen too much." I shook my head, unable to comprehend her coldness. "Too much? You've been lying to me for months, for years, and now you're telling me I've seen too much? What the hell do you expect me to do with this?" Nathan stepped forward, his voice low but insistent. "We're not asking you to understand, Daniel. We're asking you to back off. Walk away from this, from Sarah, from all of it. If you don't, things will escalate quickly, and you're not going to like where this leads." His words were like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. "What's going to happen to me?" I asked, a quiet dread creeping into my voice. I didn't know if I was asking about the situation with Sarah or about something bigger that was lurking in the shadows. Nathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced over at Sarah, as if waiting for some kind of approval. When she didn't say anything, he turned back to me. "You're already in too deep. If you keep digging, we'll have no choice but to deal with you." The finality in his words sent a chill through me. I wasn't just a husband who had been betrayed. I wasn't just a man whose life had been turned upside down. I was now part of something much bigger, something I had no understanding of, and I was beginning to realize how far-reaching this thing was. I felt the weight of their stares on me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was in control of my own fate. Nathan and Sarah weren't just playing some small game. No, this was something more, something dangerous, something far more complex than I could have ever imagined. "I don't care about your threats, Nathan," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "I need answers. You've dragged me into this mess, and now I'm going to find out everything." Nathan smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a sense of superiority. "You think you're in control? You think you can just walk away with the answers you want? It doesn't work like that. You're not going to get the truth from me, Daniel. Not unless we decide it's time for you to know." I felt the anger rising within me again, my fists clenched at my sides. I wanted to scream at him, to demand he tell me everything, but I held back. I knew I couldn't afford to lose control, not yet. The way he was speaking, the way he and Sarah were working together, it was clear that I wasn't the one making the decisions anymore. They were. A realization hit me like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just about Sarah's affair. This wasn't about some simple betrayal of trust. No, This was a web of lies, a network of deceit that had been woven around me for years. And I had no idea how far it went. I had no idea how deep I was already in. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice quieter now, but with an edge of desperation creeping in. How long have you two been working together? What's the real reason for all of this? Sarah looked away, her face an emotionless mask. Nathan didn't even flinch. He just stood there, studying me like I was a piece of meat, something to be used and discarded. It's been going on longer than you think, Nathan said finally, his tone almost bored. And it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters now is that you stop asking questions. You need to stop digging. I felt the walls closing in around me. So, you think I'll just walk away from this? That I'll forget everything I've learned tonight? Sarah's eyes flickered with something. Guilt, perhaps? Or maybe it was fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that cold, detached expression. It's not your choice, Daniel, she said, her voice hollow. You've crossed a line. And now, you have to deal with the consequences. A sickening realization washed over me. I wasn't dealing with some minor betrayal. I was dealing with something so much more dangerous, something that had been lurking in the background of my life for years, and I was only beginning to see the edges of it. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I didn't know if I even trusted myself. Nathan turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the warehouse. We'll give you some time to think about it, he said over his shoulder. But don't take too long. You won't like what happens next if you don't listen. With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there with Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had been lying to me for so long. I wanted to run, to get out of that place and never look back, but I couldn't. I was trapped in a game I didn't understand, with rules I hadn't agreed to. I looked at Sarah one last time, searching for any trace of the woman I once knew, the woman I thought I loved. But all I saw was a stranger, a cold figure who had made her choices long before I even realized there was a choice to be made. And as I turned to leave, I realized something else. The world I knew was gone, and I had no idea how far this rabbit hole went. The door of the warehouse slammed shut behind me with a loud, resonating echo, and I was left standing in the cold, oppressive silence of the night. The wind cut through my jacket, biting at my skin as I walked toward my car, each step heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I had walked into the darkness looking for answers, but all I had found was more darkness. My mind was spinning, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I knew what it felt like to have your world turned upside down, but nothing could have prepared me for what I had just learned. Sarah, the woman I had shared my life with, wasn't just keeping secrets. She wasn't just having an affair. No, this was far more sinister. She had been part of something much bigger, something dangerous, and I had no idea how far this rabbit hole went. As I slid into the driver's seat of my car, I could feel my hands trembling, my fingers slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. But one thing was certain, I couldn't go home. Not yet. Not while the weight of everything I had just learned pressed down on me, suffocating me. The road stretched out before me like an endless void, the streetlights flickering in the distance, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I couldn't stay in the same place. Not with the knowledge that Sarah and Nathan were still out there, working together in the shadows, pulling strings I couldn't see. I had to understand it all. I had to know the truth. But as I drove aimlessly through the empty streets, a creeping sense of dread settled over me. The night seemed to grow darker with every passing minute, the air thick with a sense of impending danger. I was playing a game now, one I didn't understand. The rules were unknown, the stakes higher than anything I could have imagined, and I was in too deep to turn back. I pulled over at a quiet park, my tires crunching on the gravel as I parked underneath a solitary tree. The world felt too still, too quiet, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I sat there for a long time, staring out into the darkness, my mind a chaotic mess of confusion, anger, and fear. The things Nathan had said echoed in my mind. You've crossed a line. You've seen too much. Those words haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I was just one step away from something I couldn't control. My thoughts turned to Sarah. What had she become? What had I done to push her into this world of lies and secrets? Had I been blind all along? unable to see the person she really was? Or had she always been like this? Always been part of something that I could never understand? I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone, and for the first time in hours, I checked the messages. There was nothing new from Sarah. Nothing. Just the same cold silence. She hadn't even bothered to reach out, hadn't even tried to explain herself. A part of me still clung to the hope that there was some kind of mistake, that all of this was just some twisted misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. This was real. All of it. And now, I was caught in the middle of something that was bigger than I could handle. I thought about calling her. I thought about confronting her, demanding that she explain herself, that she give me the answers I needed. But I knew it wouldn't help. The woman standing next to Nathan wasn't the woman I had married. No, she was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had been playing a role for far too long. The phone in my hand vibrated, interrupting my thoughts, and for a brief moment, I hoped it was Sarah finally reaching out. But when I looked at the screen, my heart sank. It was a number I didn't recognize, the area code unfamiliar. For a second, I hesitated, but curiosity won out. I answered the call. Daniel McAllister? The voice on the other end was low, unfamiliar, but there was something strangely calm about it, almost soothing. Who is this? I demanded, my voice tight with the tension that had been building inside me. What do you want? The voice on the other end didn't flinch at my hostility. You don't know me, the voice said smoothly, but I know everything about you. My stomach churned. What the hell is this? I barked, but the voice continued without hesitation. You've been asking questions, Daniel. Too many questions. And we don't like that. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I couldn't tell if this was another one of Nathan's games, or if it was something more. Who are you? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady, but the unease in my gut was growing by the second. We've been keeping an eye on you, the voice said. And we don't appreciate people like you poking around where you don't belong. If you know what's good for you, you'll stop digging. You'll stay away from Sarah and Nathan. Walk away from this, and you'll live to see another day. I was speechless. My mind raced as the implications of what this person was saying sank in. They've been watching me? I tried to make sense of the words, but it felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. Who are you? I asked again, more urgently this time. What do you want from me? The voice sighed, as if bored with my questions. What we want is simple. We want you to stop. Stop looking for things you aren't meant to find. Stop trying to bring attention to things that are better left in the shadows. You're in over your head, Daniel. You don't know who you're messing with. And then, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind reeling. I wasn't just dealing with Sarah and Nathan anymore. No, this was something much bigger. There were other players involved, other people who didn't want me to find out the truth. And that truth, whatever it was more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I threw my phone down onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel tightly, my hands trembling. I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't stop now. But what had I gotten myself into? The walls were closing in, and I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Everyone I had known, everyone I had loved, seemed to be part of this web of deceit. One thing was clear. I was no longer just a man looking for answers. I was part of something much bigger, and I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. But I was going to find out, no matter what the cost. The night seemed endless. The chill of the air, the darkness surrounding me, it all felt like a never-ending nightmare I couldn't escape. I kept replaying the voice on the phone in my mind, the cold threat that seemed to seal my fate. But something inside me refused to be silenced. There was still a flicker of hope, something that urged me to keep going, to finish what I had started. I drove aimlessly for a while longer, my thoughts spinning. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running. I couldn't let the fear, the threats, control me. It wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity. I couldn't keep letting Sarah and Nathan, and the shadowy figures in the background, dictate my every move. I was done being a pawn in their game. I pulled over by a quiet street, my eyes drawn to the soft glow of the streetlights, casting long shadows across the pavement. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my body finally start to ease. This was it. I wasn't going to turn back. I was going to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. I grabbed my phone again, staring at the number I had tried to forget, the number I never thought I would call. But as my thumb hovered over the screen, I felt a sudden sense of clarity. There was one last person I hadn't reached out to, someone who could finally provide the answers I needed. My brother, Ethan. He wasn't just family. He was a former investigator, someone who knew how to navigate the complex webs of lies and deceit. I dialed his number, the seconds ticking by before he picked up. Daniel. His voice came through, familiar and comforting. Is everything okay? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Ethan, I need help, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I'm in over my head. There's something bigger going on, something dangerous. I can't do this alone. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, then a sigh. I've been waiting for you to call. Don't worry, we'll figure this out. Just tell me where you are. With Ethan's help, everything began to fall into place. He connected me with a few trusted contacts who could help untangle the mess I had found myself in. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But slowly, the pieces of the puzzle started to make sense. Nathan and Sarah weren't just part of a criminal network. They were caught in something far more complex, something with international ties. But it wasn't too late. We could bring it down. We could stop it. As the days passed, I began to piece together the truth about Sarah. She wasn't the villain I had imagined. She had been manipulated, forced into this life by people who knew how to control her. She had wanted out for a long time, but she didn't know how. That's where Nathan came in. He had been one of the few who understood how to get her out. It was complicated. It was dangerous. But we had a chance. I met with Sarah one last time, in a quiet park far from the chaos. She looked tired, older somehow, but there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there the night before. She had been through so much, and I knew now that there was more to her story than I could have ever imagined. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never wanted you to be part of this. I never wanted to drag you into it. I nodded, my heart aching as I took her hand. We can fix this. Together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It wasn't the same woman I had once known. No, she was someone stronger now. Someone who had fought for her freedom. With Ethan's help, we gathered the evidence we needed to expose the people behind it all. The criminals who had been pulling the strings, using Sarah, using Nathan, using everyone in their path, were finally brought to justice. The darkness that had clouded my life for so long began to fade, piece by piece. It wasn't a perfect ending. We both had scars, emotional, physical, and mental, but we were free. We could rebuild our lives, start fresh, and finally move forward, leaving the past behind. It wasn't easy, but together, we were stronger. And as I stood by Sarah that day, watching the first light of dawn break over the horizon, I realized that sometimes the most broken things could be mended. That even in the darkest moments, there was still hope. There was still a chance for redemption. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The future wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control of it. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was someone who had fought for the truth, and in the end, it had set me free.